About 15.
You're listening to Heartbeat Radio. I'm your host, Cindi. Heartbeat Radio is a conversation aimed to take the pulse of corporate America. Opportunities for people of color, we're getting lost in the shuffle of change. I'm that provocateur of change. The hearts of corporate America are addressed. Access and opportunities will be accelerated for all people. Through Heartbeat Radio, you will gain a deeper understanding of what is necessary for change. Good evening, everybody. It's Cindi Bright. Thank you for joining Heartbeat Radio this evening as the Seahawks are playing, and so I probably have very small listenership, but we're on from 6 to 6:30, so thank you for those who are joining me this evening. I'm here with my co-host, Carl Edwards, again, as we are having a conversation called Righteousness in Corporate America. I'm going to have to beg for your forgiveness tonight. I have been sick as a dog, so I sound congested. I'm drinking amoxicillin, so I should be pretty good here soon, but I just want you to know if I sound really muffled, it's because I'm not on weather on par tonight. So anyhow, Carl Edwards, welcome back to Heartbeat Radio.
Hey, how are you, Cindi? Glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here with me tonight, too.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
You're a week ahead of me in this.
I'm a week ahead of you. I was just out with this thing for like almost 2 weeks.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I wanted, we've been continuing this dialogue about righteousness, which is about doing right by people.
Right.
And so you and I chatted more this week about kind of what, I'm going to use my terms, you chime in here. So
Sure.
Oppression of people, unhappiness of people, and the impact that it's having on people of color, and most particularly for the conversation tonight, again, let's just talk about Black people, because we are the ones that are targeted the most,
Right.
and who I think are suffering from a corporate America lens the most. And so you had a lot of thoughts. You talked to our listeners about what was on your heart this week about this.
Yeah, so, Cindi, one of the things I wanted to just kind of touch base with you and the listeners is that we are rapidly moving in this country to a scenario where there's going to be a permanent underclass, right? So this is not just me sounding the alarm. There's a lot of experts sounding this alarm. People like Jeremy Rifkin, who wrote the book, The Third Industrial Revolution. Andrew Schwab, who wrote the book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution. And what all of these experts are predicting, what they're all aligning on, is that as technology moves and it continues to increase its pace, there's going to be more and more people thrown out of work. There's going to be more and more dislocations in the workforce. Now, the thing that's important about this, Cindi, is that this is not just going to impact Black people, right? It's going to impact everybody, right? And so you're going to see this paradigm where it's going to continue to be this increasing chasm between the haves and the have-nots. Now, Bernie Sanders touched on that a little bit in his election, but you're going to see more and more of that discussion coming up in future elections because there's going to be more and more pain.
Well, I'm worried about this, and my platform that I'm running on is social and economic justice. And so when I'm asked the question about what I'm going to do first, this is my sense is that most people are wanting me to answer transportation or, the symptoms of what the system is producing. And I stand firm on the issue of pay equity, because the pay disparity issues for folks of color are statistically shown. Women of color are 37% behind market, right? And in a market, and that's 37% behind to white male dollar. What also is not happening is that the rate of increases for salaries are not keeping up with the rate at which the growth in this economy is happening here. And this is such a wealthy economic area. So to your point about the chasms, right? So the gap is getting wider and wider.
Yeah.
And to be truthful, I said on the beginning of the show, let's talk about Black people, but that's not true. it's a part of the truth. But the 50-year-olds, so I'm saying that the older demographic is also going to be hit by this. They're going to be hit by this hard. It's already starting to happen.
Yep.
I know in all the forums I'm speaking, it's older people in listening to what I have to say because they're affected by this the most. And so I'm scared for people here, right? Like that, it's becoming so egregious. It's becoming so egregious, and how do we deal with this? How do we deal with this?
Yeah, so one of the things that I hope we get into a discussion to at some point in your campaign and in the future is we need an entirely new economy here in America. So Jeremy Rifkin, Andrew Schwab, what they're talking about is not just kind of the traditional symptoms, right?
Mm-hmm.
What they're saying is that we need an entire economic shift. We need an entire new economic program. Now, the reason why this is super, super important, okay, I can't stress this enough. In fact, let me give an analogy, right? If you basically keep doing the same thing over and over again, you cannot expect what?
The same thing.
You cannot
Right.
You cannot expect different results, right? So in an economy that's designed to commoditize people, right? So this economy is designed to drive to the bottom, to get to the lowest possible cost,
Yes.
right? Cost in terms of resources, cost in terms of people.
Yes.
So if you're in an economy that's designed to get to the lowest cost, then there's this inevitable kind of downward spiral that's occurring. And that spiral is what's occurring right now. And so as we see companies and corporations moving to get to the lowest cost, right, we're going to see more and more people dislocated from the American economy.
Right.
So to your point, this is why people, above 50, more senior individuals.
The profits are not going down, right?
The profits are not going down.
Profits are not going down.
Profits are
skyrocketing.
Profits are skyrocketing.
I was looking at some of the data around that this week about how much it has just like tripled and quadrupled, right?
Yeah.
So the wealth gap is real, and it's more intense.
It's well documented,
Right.
right? And so this is why we need to have a conversation in this country about righteousness, right? We almost need an entirely new Declaration of Independence. We need like a new Declaration of Human Rights. What does it mean? I mean, what does it mean to have billions of dollars of profits and still have people keep their wages the same for years? What does that discussion mean? Because if you remember, right, when we were growing up, when we were back in the baby boom era, right, there was this inevitable discussion.
Speak for yourself, Carl.
All right, for me,
No,
okay, I fess up, right?
I am too. I'm on the border of baby boom, but go ahead.
But back in that era, it was all about the next generation was supposed to do better than the current generation, right? Your parents and my parents, they lived for seeing me do better than they did. But let me tell you something. Their pension and their retirement is better than mine.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
That's right.
My parents are school teachers, and right now, they probably have one of the last best retirements and pension plans in America.
Right. That's right. Looking at the young folks, I mean, I raised a millennial, right? And so, just listening to what his own challenges are, right? Highly educated, master level educated, Stanford educated son of mine that I just love to brag about.
Right.
Can't seem to pull in a friggin' check worth. Stuff that's being said to him is like, it's the WTF factor, right? Like, they're like, well, where's your experience? Well, I'm sorry that you can't seem to understand that what it takes to, be a high major scholar, athlete. You don't understand what it takes for that. But a lot of that, so those are young people of color, right?
Yeah.
Coming into college, getting their college education the ways that they can. And they're no better off, I say the same thing, right? You're right. He's 26 years old, struggling to try to keep health insurance, and struggling to try to make a decent job, and struggling to try to keep income coming in to keep a roof over his head.
Yeah.
And society says you go get educated and you do it, but that is not the case.
Exactly.
So we have this whole young demographic of people who are struggling. I talk to lots of young people. People reach out for help on career coaching, and they're like, they can't get in the front door, right?
It's just, Cindi, the reason why your campaign is so important is because most Americans and most scholars are afraid to have the conversation about reordering our economic structure. So if you think about this whole movement around Bitcoin and all this new type of currency. The most powerful dimension of that is for everyday people to leverage that to build an alternate economy.
So
And that's what they're extreme. That's what the powers that be are extremely afraid of. See, let me phrase it like this. They will be totally content for us to continue having this debate about, well, it's Democrats versus Republicans, right? It's black versus white. It's blah, blah, blah. The most fundamental thing they're afraid of is for somebody to get intelligent and say, hey, wait a second. It's not about this stuff. These things are symptoms, and these things are leverages and tools that you're using. The main thing that you are afraid of is an honest, open conversation about how do we restructure and redistribute wealth in the wealthiest nation in the world. And by the way, every other nation has to go the same way. So that conversation is an international conversation. It's a global conversation.
It's happening, because I actually had on my show here, if Alexis Williamson is listening, she's the CEO of Life Cafe, which is, they are basically redesigning the economy, and they're using Bitcoin as their technology. Now they're trying to help take the banks out of the equation.
Yeah.
I may not be saying it properly, Alexis, if you're listening to this, but it's peer-to-peer blending, because they're looking at helping people be successful in a way that we're not dependent on the man, right? Because that system, as you're talking about, is built to keep most of us down.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's the fight, right? And so they are out. I'm hoping they were just in Japan this last couple of weeks. I'm hoping they got funded the way they needed to, because they're a powerhouse of an organization that's going to come forward and help change this conversation.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's creating fear, because the people who will begin to be successful, right? So that means that people that this country doesn't want to be successful, the people we see shot in the news every week,
Right.
the lack of justice, and when you look across this country and see women who look like me are all rising and saying enough is enough, we're going to help try to change it. The fear of this change is creating some wilder behaviors.
Yeah.
Right? Wilder.
Yeah. And another point, that your listeners, everybody needs to understand is that we're not talking about something that cannot be done, right? So let me just give you a couple of data points, right? We all know and understand the creative power of rap music. Where did rap come from? Rap came from the frustration of African Americans that had no voice, that had no cultural outlet. So they created their own. So listen, they created their own, right? The same thing can happen in the economic sphere. We can create our own economy, and it will be successful. Why will it be successful? Because we have powerful brain power in the African American community and in disenfranchised communities in general. We have powerful talent. We have powerful creativity. So it's not a matter of we don't have the creativity. It's not a matter of we don't have the talent. It's a matter of right now we're locked into structures that are inevitably designed to continue this downward
Well,
spiral.
first we have to stay alive to be able to have the conversation, right? So
Yes.
we're fighting for our lives right now too. We're fighting for our lives across this country to stay alive and not be sniffed off for what? Oh, I don't know, watching TV in our own home, right?
Right.
So
So my argument is that we will stay alive. And then those of us that begin to actually glimpse what's going on here will stand up and create this alternate economy. And when that begins to happen, what you will then see is you will see communities like Rainier Radio, Rainier community. You'll see communities beginning to develop their own, what I call community platforms.
right.
And those platforms will have enough economic power to actually negotiate with the current predominant corporations.
Right.
And it can be done, and it will be done, but somebody has to have the vision and the courage to stand up and say, number one, enough is enough.
You've had this vision I've known you for 10 years.
Yeah.
You've had this vision for 10 years. So
Yeah.
what's next for this conversation with you?
And number two, we need to get enough people of like minds to actually start investing in this type of movement. So your friend Alexis, I'm very interested in talking to her because it sounds like she's got a blueprint that's a workable
She
blueprint.
does, yeah.
And if we get enough people behind a workable blueprint, trust me, Cindi, there is no stopping us.
we were talking earlier this week about just the level of frustration that is going on, the people who are just shut down and dismissed and not feeling valid or valued anymore in their jobs, and they're just like milking out paychecks. And what's your sense about, what's your pulse on what's going on with other folks?
Yeah, so when we talk about this downward spiral, when we talk about the commoditization of people, what's beginning to happen is that it's kind of similar to what happened in the 1920s in the Depression. We're moving into another gilded age where you've got this super rich elite and you have this super frustrated chasm of folks that are working every day just to eke out a living. And so what we're beginning to see is we're beginning to see people with degrees. I'm talking 2, 3
Yes.
degrees, right? We're beginning to see their pay level off, right? We're beginning to see those in management continue to rise in terms of accumulating wealth, accumulating stock, and those that are not there just kind of treading water. And so what that does is it dramatically decreases the quality of life. So stress begins to go up. Once stress goes up, health begins to get complicated. People can't take as many vacations as they used to. People can't send Johnny and Jane off to college like as they want to, because guess what? College is becoming out of reach. So unless your child's got some way to get a scholarship or something, going to college now is becoming more and more problematic, right? So the entire quality of life, that American dream, is becoming more and more elusive for more and more people, or they are running harder and harder on a treadmill just to try to stay and keep that American dream. Now, at some point, just like the oil crisis, right? We know that oil is a scarce commodity, and it's a finite commodity, which means, guess what? At some day, there's going to be the oil crash, right? So just like there's going to be an oil crash, there's going to be an economic crash where you're going to see more people now. You're going to see more people with their lives out of balance because of work than those in balance.
What I'm watching right now, I agree with that. What I'm watching, and maybe because, this fluish stuff that I got the last few days has knocked me on my behind,
Right.
where I'm like, I'm so used to going 5,000 miles an hour
Yes.
every day,
Yeah.
which is what most of our lives are like, right?
Exactly.
To make it. And
We have to.
what was really interesting ever since number 45 got installed in office, is me watching the feeds, the social media feeds. And so just this week, for example, I sit and I look at the national crisis this week, is every week, but this week was Botham Jean, right? The young man who was in his home watching TV, getting murdered by a cop. Who, and I heard, there's a video going around that a guy did that just breaks down why everything this cop says is so preposterous. But you see that, and I saw the funeral procession. I don't know if you saw videos of that with them. No, it wasn't the funeral procession. It was the Dallas Cowboy game yesterday, and the marchers came out and had 2 caskets in front because they've been demanding for the NFL players to take a knee to what's his name? Johnson, right? Massa Johnson, and they are not doing it. And so there's this fight going on within our own community about standing together for justice,
Right.
number one. And number two, as I'm skimming through the social media, I see all these pictures of people with their dogs and their wine tasting and all this stuff. And my life has been so thrown off for the past 2 years now,
Right.
that I haven't even come up for air to even think about taking a vacation or taking a selfie, right?
Right.
Like all of that normal stuff that everybody else does.
Yes.
My everyday heart is on what do we do? What's next?
Yeah.
How do we deal with this? What's the next crisis? Every Monday, it's something else that's coming out of the news. I just am getting yelled at by my producer because I started preaching and I was beating on the desk, and he just glared at me like, you should know better than that, Cindi. But you can tell how passionate I am about how upsetting it is to have to deal with this every single week and to not have any sense of quote unquote normalization in my life anymore.
Totally. If your readers get a chance, if your listeners get a chance, go check out some of the Black Mirror series on Netflix. because they actually run these series and very much document and visualize what we're talking about. So one of the episodes that they did was you had this society where you had this huge dichotomy between the rich and poor.
Yeah.
And the rich folks were running around and they were walking their dogs and they were taking selfies and
I'm just like,
and the poor folks are just trying to eke out a living a day to day.
Right.
The tragic thing is that that's where we're headed.
That's where
right?
we're at.
And so this Black Mirror series is so much on point. And so the thing people need to realize is that this is super important for your listeners, right? This is why this conversation is so important. Is that this huge chasm beginning to build between, to your point, folks that can walk their dogs every day, folks that they can come into work leisurely because they're not concerned about being thrown out.
I know.
Why aren't they concerned? Because they know when they walk into that corporation, they're part of the in crowd.
Right.
They're part of that cultural fit,
Right.
that cultural clique
Right.
that has decided and has figured out a way to maintain power in a corporate setting so that they're not threatened by anything, right? They know who they're going to put on probation. They know who they're going to throw out. And it's all orchestrated to make sure that they stay
That's
in
right.
their
100.
roles.
100. That's
Right?
so right. It's
And-
so right.
Yeah, and so, again, I keep emphasizing this. The important thing is that why is this such an important conversation for white people as well as Black people? Why is this such an important conversation for white people as well as Black people, brown people, women, all kind of people? The reason why this is super, I hope everybody can hear me, is because you can't keep running this game forever. It's like a pyramid scheme. At some point, as they keep chopping out folks, they're going to start cutting you out.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And that you means everybody.
Right.
And so at some point, there's more and more stack. There's less and less cars to cut out.
Right.
Which means,
They
trust
start
me,
cutting into you.
they start cutting you.
That's
Which means
right.
at some point, your card is coming up
That's exactly right.
pretty soon, right?
That's exactly
And so as you sit back and you think, oh, this is not going to impact me, trust me, baby, it's coming for you. And so we all need to recognize that we're all in this boat together,
Yeah.
right? Black, white, we all came out of Africa.
Yeah.
We all had the same parents. So what's up?
What's that?
Right? What's up? How can you consciously sit back and watch entire people groups get decimated? Watch entire
What's the answer to that? That is a good question. How do people sit on the sidelines? How do you post the selfie knowing that people are being murdered daily? Like, how? I don't even get the psyche around how somebody can be like that.
Yeah, so let me just give you like a clue to that, almost like a potential answer for that. The answer to that is that when we were talking about that alternate economy,
Yeah.
it's incumbent upon those of us with consciousness. I don't care if you're white, pink, polka dot, yellow. If you have a conscience, you need to be finding a way that you can invest in that alternate economy. Why? Because eventually that alternate economy is going to be the predominant economy.
That's exactly right.
And if you invested in it, then you get to reap the benefits, right? But if you don't, then you're going to find yourself on the opposite side of righteousness and justice coming down the road.
That is the answer that I give. I get asked this question many times on the campaign trail, where I have older white men say, "Why would I put a woman like you in office?"
Right.
And I say to them exactly what you just said, because you will be receiving. If you're not, first off, when you lift up others, you rise too.
Exactly.
So it's in your best interest to do that. But more importantly, if you don't, you're going to end up living with the system that you created to oppress everybody else. You're going to be a part of that oppressed system.
Exactly.
So how do we bring people together and say, it's time to stop looking at the race element to it, right? Or the, wealthy versus the
Right.
not wealthy, right?
Yeah. It's time to get our heads out of the sand
Yes.
and stop being buffooned by these fake conversations about, these fake polarization conversations. It's black versus white.
Yeah.
It's Republicans versus Democrats. No, baby. It's rich versus poor. It's right versus wrong. It's
Yeah.
pretty much that simple.
It's pretty much
And you just need to decide which side you want to be on. And to me, That's an easy equation. I mean, my mother taught me right and wrong.
There were 53 million women at least that didn't agree with that, right? They put this person in office, and so, they don't see it that way. They see that by playing into the division, that means that they're going to actually get something gained, and they are just have not even began to understand that they're not being replaced by other people. They're being replaced by technology, and the more they keep their head in the sand about the way the world is changing and believing that old-time jobs are coming back, those days have passed, right? And so, but then there's an element of people too who are just happy to put any kind of plug into the system that keeps other people out because they believe they'll have more, right? And so hatred is a learned behavior, right? And so, I mean, definitely there's going to be people left behind in this whole equation, but Carl, I'm hoping, I'm trying to be a part of the change. I'm trying to be a part of the system change. I know you are too. I hope there's enough life left in me that I get to see some of this come through. That I know my son is not left living in the kind of system that has disadvantaged so many people for so long.
So here's one thing we can do, and we probably have a minute left, so let me just say this. Let me just take 30 seconds to say this. One thing that's incumbent upon us as change agents to do is to create the systems, to create the avenues by which people can begin to invest in this alternate economy, right? There's a lot of listeners that would like to do that, but right now we don't have a mechanism for them to participate.
Right.
So one of the things you and I need to be about is creating these mechanisms for people to actually, essentially opt out of the current economic system and begin to invest in a new one. And I know that's one of the things that you're dramatically concerned about in your campaign.
I am. So, yep, of course, this time flew by, Carl. To all of our listeners that are listening to this today, thank you so much for listening to us while the Seahawk game is going on. I know that's a hard choice to make. Of course, I know you guys love me more, but thank you to everybody for joining this conversation with us. We are continuing this series on righteousness in corporate America and the conversation aimed at driving change. Thank you again. I'll see you all next Monday at 6 p.m. live.
All right. We'll see you. Thank you.
Avenue Radio News Update. I'm Dan McGillis. As the show looks at the market celebrates its 79th